And I'm just looking over at my husband, and he has these like silent tears just streaming down his face. I could just tell he was just like scared with what she was saying. And I just like go like internal, and I'm just like talking to God. I'm like, no.
Hey, I'm Amanda, mom, doula, childbirth educator, and birth nerd. Welcome to Let's Talk Birth, the podcast where we get into real birth stories, talk through the awkward stuff, and cover the things nobody told you about. So grab your raspberry leaf tea, get comfy, and let's talk birth. Hey, welcome to Let's Talk Birth. My name is Amanda, and I'm your host. Today, we are joined by the beautiful, amazing, wonderful Lauren. She is a previous doula client of mine who is going to be talking about both her first and her second birth, and I'm so excited for you to hear about them. Now, her first birth did have a slightly traumatic component to it towards the end. I assure you it's not going to be graphic, but it might be triggering. If that's something you're sensitive to, I have written the time codes for it down in the show notes. So if you would like to, you know where to skip to. But I do encourage you to listen to the full birth story up until that point if you need to, and then come back after that to hear her second birth story, which was an incredibly beautiful and redemptive birth. Well, without further ado, Lauren, will you please introduce
Yes.
yourself?
Yeah. Lauren, I was blessed to have Amanda as our labor prep education, right? Like as far as we can say. Yeah, as a labor prep doula, and it was just so great. And yeah, I'm happy to just be here sharing my stories of both my births. And so yeah, with our first, he was born in 2020. So peak 2020, we are, already dealing with like the spouse not being able to come into your appointments or anything like that. And so, your first uh birth and pregnancy, you're already like it just was already kind of like that part was just like stripped away. So not having my partner like in the room with me, um, he just felt so disconnected from kind of the pregnancy as far as like going to the appointments, hearing the heartbeat, all of those things. And so that I think took a toll on just how he was feeling going into how to support me, like knowing how to support me and all of that, in the room. And so when it came time to, go time, I had educated myself on all of the things that I thought that I, at least needed to know. And so going into it, what exactly is an epidural? Um, how is it put in? Like all of those things. And do I want an epidural? Do I want a non-medicated birth? And, just really educating on myself on like at least what I wanted my birth to look like. And I think I went in, one, rigid with what I wanted it to look like, and two, um, not educated enough because I was seeking out all this information by myself. And so, and I don't think I shared enough with my husband, um, going into it. And so I was like expecting him, I just had all these expectations of like, yeah, like you're supposed to like squeeze my hips and, like he had no idea what any of that was. And so um that just I think made it really hard. And so going into kind of the start of labor, my water had broke, and and from there, I kind of just like had one of my really good friends who had just had the most beautiful home birth story that I have ever heard. And so I was just like, can I like have you on call to just like walk me through like what I'm experiencing and, just kind of like tell me what to do? Because I wanted to at least labor at home as long as possible. And so I knew that was just like kind of my ultimate goal before going to the hospital. And so yeah, my water broke like the morning of like the 17th, and contractions just like weren't really there. Like it just kind of would come on and come off. And so I had prodromal labor. Um, and that went on for 3 days. And I was so determined, right? Back to my rigorous, this is what I want my birth to look like. I am laboring at home as long as possible. I didn't go in to the hospital to be checked. I didn't go in to have them just kind of like look at me and say, yeah, you're good to like continue laboring at home, or yeah, we need to have, you admitted. And so yeah, I just was like literally just like tried to just eat, move my body, and sleep. And that's what I did for 3 days until the morning of the 19th. Like contractions were getting a little bit more consistent. They still were like pretty light. And I was kind of like, am I just, uh, am I just like not feeling them as, like maybe they are strong and I just don't really realize it. So anyway, got more consistent where they were at least 5 minutes apart. But again, it just wasn't like super strong. So I was kind of like, this is odd, but let's go in and like let's just get looked at. So so we go in and they have me in triage, and they were just like uh basically admitted me right away because they were like, you're losing a lot of fluid, and like baby's okay, like you're okay, but yeah, you've lost a lot of fluid, and that has just been a long time to kind of go um, since your water broke. And so yeah, they admitted me, and then right from there it was just like Pitocin. And then from there I was like, well, I still want to be like, no epidural. So, but I didn't know that like basically Pitocin equals epidural, because you have to be like a monster to, like you are a golden monster of being able to endure Pitocin contractions because they are brutal. And so yeah, it was like very instant, as far as like contractions just got very, very intense very quickly. And and then let's see. So yeah, I think I got to the point I probably labored with Pitocin for probably 3 or 4 hours, and then it just became to a point where I was like, I got to the point where I was just looking at my husband. I was like I had such a outer body experience of like, this is pain like I have never felt before. And I couldn't grasp onto anything. Everything just felt like I was out of control. Like couldn't I couldn't breathe, do my like breathing techniques, or like everything was just out the door. I was like, I can't do this. And um and then my husband was like, you need to get that, Bruno. Like are you need to get it. And so I was like, okay. And um so finally got that epidural, and then I was just able to like sleep. And I slept pretty much all through the night, and then my contractions in the morning started getting uh more and more um more and more intense, um and going backwards a little bit. So my water had broke, the 17th. When I went to the hospital, I had not dilated at all. And so that is why they kind of were like, we need to get things moving along. Um, so that's an important piece here because that yeah, that's why it kind of like even when I was admitted to the hospital and on Pitocin for, 6+ hours, I still was like it was taking my body a long time to dilate. And so going from that like super intense, contractions with Pitocin and all of that, then getting the epidural, things kind of like calmed down and I was able to rest. And then in the morning, that's when like I woke up like around, I think it was like 10. And then I was like, I feel like I need to poop. And they were like, "Oh, okay, let's get you checked." So then they checked me and they're like, "Oh, yeah, you can actually start pushing in just a few minutes." So they like had everything kind of like prepping in between that time of me getting ready and they were coaching me through like how I should be pushing. Um, and then I recall like asking for the mirror because I really wanted to like see what was going on. And that was a really cool experience. Because I feel like it helped me know where I was pushing. And then yeah, from there, like that experience of just like pushing and then he was here it felt like it happened so quickly. And then, yeah, I remember just like holding him and he hadn't cried yet. And had been like 4 minutes, but he was just like very alert still. And he was like, his eyes were open. He's like looking at me and it was just like the weirdest thing. But I was like, okay, like he's not crying. Um, but then they started kind of like rubbing his back and then that kind of like made him cry out. So that was that was good, but it was like a long 4 minutes. I was like, is everything okay? But yeah, as he's out, then they let me know that I had a retained placenta, and that was like really heartbreaking because I really wanted to uh have my, you know, uh placenta like dried and have the pills and make encapsulate the placenta, and so I like had that all set up. And then when they said it was like retained and completely like in pieces, like it's not salvageable. um and then the kind of traumatizing part of this is them having to go in, um just the doctor in her hand, her arm actually, was just like all in there, like trying to just like get all of the placenta out. And that, was just like very painful and like I just had never experienced like never experienced that, but anything like that before. And so that was just um yeah, hard, but at the same time, heartbreaking because I really wanted to have that placenta,
I have a question about
for
that.
that journey. Yeah,
Who was it? Did the doctor say that you couldn't encapsulate the placenta because it was retained, or was it the specialist you were having encapsulate it?
it was the doctor. Yeah.
Okay,
So I
that's
didn't
really
even see it.
yeah, that's really interesting because from my experience, that's not the case. Because I mean, when you're doing the whole process, you like clean it up and then cut it up so it's already in pieces before it's even drying. So
Yeah,
that's really interesting.
that's
Sorry.
interesting. Yeah.
Side
No,
note.
it is
Okay.
definitely something that I've thought about after the fact. I was like, I just don't know, but at that point, I think it was just so like
There was so
it
much
was just
going
so
on.
like yeah,
Yeah.
so much
Yeah.
going on. And yeah, that time I like didn't even like see it. But I also didn't ask to see it. So it was just like, yeah, a lot going on. Um, so yeah, that was our first birth story. And And again, it was just like I walked away from that, um, again, just it didn't feel like a team when with, my husband and I just like going into that thing. It felt like we were just both like super clueless and I knew only as much as I could know through my own seeking and finding, right? So having uh doulas in this world and like it becoming more of a known thing that is kind of happening and um yeah, then when you kind of like popped up on the surface and like working with your husband and knowing that that was something that you were super passionate about, I was like, oh my gosh, I need to get connected to her. As soon as we found out we were pregnant. And so, yeah, going through your classes and just both of us going through that too and learning and just educating ourselves on like all of the things. I think it just really set it up to be more of a redemptive story going into this, feeling like we were a team and that we were doing this together and he knew exactly like how to support me. Um, and so I think, yeah, when you're going through the most vulnerable time in your life, like having your spouse to support you in that through that is so important. Um, And so, yeah, do you want me to pause before going into Weston's story?
Nope, go for it.
Okay. So, yeah, when we had Weston, very, very similar in the sense of like how my body kind of started labor. And so 3 a.m. water break, and I'm kind of just like trying to distract myself this time. Um, and so I just remember like doing the last minute kind of like tidy up, clean up stuff. I was doing the dishes and seeing if I was feeling any contractions. Um, and again, they were just like very light. And so I was kind of preparing my mind, okay, this may be similar in that I may not start like labor right away. Um, and so I again just tried to distract myself and then I remember like Sean was like figuring out where our oldest was gonna be. And parents out there, have your plan B, C, and D because our plan A and B was like nowhere to be found at 3 a.m. So we were like scrambling, trying to figure out where are we gonna take our son while we go have a baby. So that was interesting. So we were waiting like 3 hours had gone by. And I was okay with that because I was like, okay, like we know we're gonna be going to the hospital right away this time. But my body's just like not really doing anything right now. I felt like I was having more like Braxton Hicks is what it felt like.
Hmm.
Just the tightness. And that was kind of just off and on. I wasn't timing anything or anything like that. And then, yeah, once we like got in the car and we got our oldest settled, where he was going, contractions like were nowhere to be found. So I was like, okay. And then we get to the hospital. It's probably like 7:30, 8 a.m. By that time. Um, and we get through triage. Triage, I felt like we were there for a very long time. Um, and I think they were just kind of like waiting to see if I would have any contractions. And that's exactly what they were doing. And they came back and they were like, do you want to go home or we can admit you now? Since your water did break, like you can be admitted. And so after talking to Sean, we just decided like we're gonna stay and going into that, we knew what that meant, which meant, there's probably gonna be interventions and they may want to speed things up. Just depends on who our midwife is and, like how they're gonna go about that. Um, and so yeah, so once we got settled into the room, um, I remember just like asking, I was like, can I have like a few hours to just see how my body adjusts, just kind of like being settled in here. And and they were like, yeah, of course. So I was like feeling really good about that. Um, and then, kind of asking them like what they had as far as like alternatives to Pitocin. Because again, like I had that dream of like non-medicated, um, as far as not having an epidural. Um, that was kind of a goal of mine. And so so they said, well, we have like this pill called Cytotec, and that basically just ripens and softens the cervix, and that will might be able to like get some things going for you as far as like contractions starting and all of that. And I was like, hmm, okay. So I remember just kind of like researching more about it. And in that time I was like, okay. And so I said, I know that my body is pretty sensitive to medication, so can I take half of one? They were like, yeah, of course. So they did half. And probably after an hour, I was like feeling like my contractions were getting stronger. And so I moved to the shower and just like labored in the shower for a while. And I kid you not, like the midwife came back in, she was like, okay, like this is really working. And I was like, at that point, I couldn't talk through my contractions. It was like really speeding up. Um, so I was like, cool, this might, be this might go the way that I want it to go. And so then I was like able to kind of just like move around. And at that time, like Sean was doing like the counter pressure in different, we're doing that in like different positions. We're kind of like doing a little dance, kind of just like swaying back and forth with one another through the contractions. And that was like really special. And then I remember probably like around 4 is when, so that was probably like 4 hours of that. And then I remember like around 4, I had asked for the nitrous oxide. Loved that. And I felt like I was able to just like really focus on my breathing because it requires you to really focus on your breathing doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that really helped just like calm me down. And yeah, I was feeling good with that. And then things took a turn from there as far as just like speeding up like really quickly. So,
Yep.
um, the, the they wanted to kind of like monitor baby's heart rate at that point. And so I went from being really mobile to having to be hooked up to the wall with that. Um, and so I was sitting on the bed, but I was kind of like upright and just sitting on the bed. And they wanted to kind of just get few minutes, hour or so, to get yeah, just get like his heart rate and kind of see how consistent it was. And then they were like, they came in a few times and they were like, not sure if the monitor was like not working or if they were reading it right, but his heart rate was dropping down like super low. And at one point, they just kind of like laid me on my left side and they're like, okay, you're gonna need to stay in this position just because that's kind of what baby is reacting the best to. And so I was like, okay. And then my contractions were just getting like more and more like closer together. I hadn't been checked at that point either, and no one was asking to check me, so I just kind of like let that go too. And
had you had a cervical check at that point except for in triage?
I think it was just in triage. And I
Okay.
think, yeah, I think it was just in triage, and I may have been like 1 centimeter dilated at that point. It wasn't, yeah, it wasn't super dilated. And then um yeah, once they laid me on my left side, from there it was kind of a blur. And I just remember my midwife coming up to me, and she was like really, really close. And I had Sean's hand on my left, and she was like holding my right hand. And she just is like looking at me in the face, and she's just like, okay, things are getting pretty intense right now, and we want to make sure like baby's heart rate is good and safe. And so we're gonna actually um, check you, see where you're at as far as like how dilated you are, and then they're gonna do an epidural just to kind of like slow the contractions down, and hopefully that releases some stress for baby. And so I was like, okay. Um, I was 8 centimeters dilated at that point, and I just remember like the midwife also saying like, because things are getting intense, like they really want to just make sure that everything's going smoothly. So the doctor is going to come in now. And so they doctor comes in, and she's just very like matter of fact, kind of just like straight to the point. This is what it is. She was telling us like lay of the land, like what's going on. And because his heart rate was dropping dangerously low, there were just like a lot of talk of just like we could possibly go into like emergency C-section, and then laying out the whole shebang on like what, what that looks like. Sean not being able to be in the room, it would be like uh isolated, and kind of just like going through like words being used that were like death and for me or the baby. And we were just like, what happened? Like from literally like 10 minutes ago, like what is going on? Um, and so then like from there, it kind of she just kind of like started sounding like wah 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 to me in my head. And I'm just looking over at my husband, and he has these like silent tears just streaming down his face. I could just tell he was just like scared with what she was saying. And I just like go like internal, and I'm just like talking to God. I'm like, no, that's all I could say. I was just out loud, just no, this isn't happening. No. And and what I meant by that was just like we need to walk out here a family of three people alive. Like what she's saying right now is like not gonna happen. And from there, I kid you not, like within 5 seconds. So all of that's going on. They had already put the epidural in me. I'm on my left side, so I'm holding on both hands to Sean, and and I just remember the urge to push, and I hadn't felt that in my first birth. And so I was just like I couldn't talk. I was just like, what is going on? But all of a sudden I'm like roaring like this lioness, and I was just like, who am I? Like, what is going on? And all I could hear, because my eyes are closed at this point, and they were just like, is she pushing? Is she pushing? And and the blanket's on me. So they're like, move the blanket, and they're like, oh, the baby's coming. The baby's coming. And a part of like Weston's like thing, I guess, too, was that he was sunny side up. And I feel him like coming down the birth canal because the epidural was placed in me as I'm laying on my left side. I did not like it basically didn't work on where it was supposed to go because I'm not sitting up and it's not, getting to my hips and down. It just went to basically my left butt cheek down down to my left leg. So I was feeling everything. And um so yeah, I'm feeling him and I just feel him turn in my birth canal, come down. And I mean they barely had time to be there to catch him because it was just like my body just pushed and he like came right out and with no problem. Like he didn't have the umbilical cord wrapped around his neck. Like he didn't have like anything wrong with him. There was just like all of that like intensity basically like left the room after he came out because it was just like so fast. And um yeah, it was like so crazy. But again, it was like I say it's intense because of like all of that just like intense conversation happening and like the shift in the room was just like it was so blissful and then to just like switch to such a serious conversation. My husband's crying and like I'm just like what is going on? And to then just like my body just like immediately doing something that I like did not have control over, and it was just like the most beautiful feeling and experience like ever because I was like here I like wanted a non-medicated birth, but I got to feel him and every movement that he was making like coming out. And so that's why I call this a redemptive birth story because it was like meshed with what I desired, but also like in the midst of all that intensity, like just having a moment to be like have a conversation with the Lord, like, no, like, no, this isn't happening. Um, and to yeah, have your baby come out on just so healthy and perfect was just yeah, everything.
That's amazing. It makes my little doula heart
Yeah.
so happy hearing all of that. Just
Yes.
the you, even you advocating for yourself, the I want to get admitted and then can we just do like half of the site attack and like knowing your options and being able to do that is so
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah.
And I'm how Sean's not here obviously, but how from your knowledge how did he feel it with his part between the first and the second?
Gosh, it was so different. And I know that he would say it was like he felt like he was in the room and like making decisions with me and knowing what was going on. I think it just was such a different story for him too, because um one, he felt so a part of it. Um and yeah, I don't think that he felt that in our first uh even through the pregnancy. I think it started like with the pregnancy too, of just like not being there for a lot of that stuff. So seeing the ultrasound, like the live ultrasound, like he didn't have that click that like wow, like my baby's moving around in there and all of that. So um yeah, like we weren't prepared to be parents in 2020, right? Like that, I think that in itself was just like he was a surprise. And that was all just like such a shift for us, being first time parents
So he was
in a
both a
pandemic.
surprise. He was a surprise baby and the
Right.
pandemic.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
wild.
Yeah. 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 So,
That makes sense.
right. Yeah. So I think that. a lot of that had a lot to play into why the second time around was just like such a different experience for us altogether. Because, yeah, it just was like, yeah, we're in this together. You're in the room with me. You're not the one physically having the baby, but you're helping me. Like, I need your help to do this. And yeah, feeling so supported through that was just beautiful. It made the whole experience so different.
That's awesome. Yeah, I remember when we first started meeting for our like prep stuff, and what I
Yeah.
typically do is ask both parents. I start with the dad because usually the dad is least informed between the two, and I ask like, "Hey, can you just tell me what the process of birth is?" And he was so uneducated on it, and I felt so great being able to
Yeah.
like bring that education to the both of you, but him especially because you at least had experienced the prenatal appointments with your first and knew enough
Right.
of what your body was going through, and he really had no grid for any of it. And on top of that, he saw how you were experiencing your first one. So that was, yeah, he
Yeah.
he was I'm so glad that we were able to have those meetings because that was an incredible shift for him, just seeing the difference. And
Yeah.
then when I came to when I came to pick up the placenta, I remember very night like it was yesterday. I remember walking in and seeing your face and like you were zonked. And I just remember whispering like, "Hey, how'd it go?" And you were like, "It was crazy
Yes.
and it was amazing." And you looked so tired, and I was like, "I
Yeah.
will see you in a few days. I can't wait to hear the whole story." And oh my gosh, it's
Yes.
such a crazy story. I love that you had, like, even though you did end up getting the epidural, that you got to basically experience birth without it, although you did have it, like,
Yeah.
just in your butt cheek.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. That was crazy. And I totally remember you coming in too. And that was so like just weird for me too, because I was just like, oh my gosh, like Amanda's here. And then yeah, and then like seeing my placenta too, and then like having that to walk away with as well was just like the cherry on top.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember one of the first things that you said when we first started meeting was that you really wanted a redemptive birth. And it sounds like you got it, which is amazing.
I did.
I love that so much.
Yeah. I truly did. Yeah.
How was like we talked about your experience in the birth, but looking back um with birth in general, how do you feel about it now? Like you had obviously an intense experience the first time around, and you had all of those other complications with it being during COVID and all of that. But now that you've had a redemptive birth, how do you feel about it? What are your thoughts on the process of it as a birthing woman and um, yeah, as a mom?
Yeah. I absolutely love it. When my friends have babies, I'm like, tell me the whole thing. Like, I want to know, like, the grueling parts as well. Like, tell me everything. I am I'm so passionate about it. I daydream like, wow, like what if I became, a midwife or like immersed myself some way into like labor and delivery. I truly like am so passionate about it that yeah, and I mean I felt that way after I had my first as well, but I think it became more of like a passion after having Wes. And so yeah, I'm like, if we could have one, tomorrow, like I would do it again.
Totally. How
Yeah.
was your postpartum experience with both? What was what was your postpartum experience with the first one like, and how was the second one
Mhm.
different, if it was?
Yeah. Definitely different experiences. With my first, I it was I definitely struggled. And I think that was a lot in part to, again, the dynamic between my husband and I during that time was just like, the world was going crazy, and we were trying to figure out everything. Um, and because of COVID, we didn't have a lot of support around. And so it was literally just the two of us figuring this out and not having a lot of people, like it would be like, drop-offs and people dropping off food, and like I don't want to minimize that support at all because that was super helpful. But having people physically come in and support you is so different than any other type of support. And so and just checking in, like sitting down, seeing you face to face and checking in on like how you're doing. We both, I think, went through postpartum depression and anxiety. um i I felt very alone. And I think he felt like I have no idea what to do right now. And so it just felt very, um, yeah, just very like isolating in every aspect. And so, yeah, just figuring out the day in and day out of your newborn. And um, I remember like knowing nothing about the fact that your breast milk doesn't come in right away. And so I'm having this extremely fussy baby and having no idea why. And like, yeah, my milk hadn't come in until like 5 days later. So here he is, like up cluster feeding and all that. And like me not knowing anything about like, is he gonna be okay? Like he lost weight in his first appointment and how normal that is. But when you are told like, yeah, your baby's losing weight, you're gonna need to put him on formula and like all those things, like you don't you don't know what you don't know. And so hearing that is like alarming, and you immediately go to, I'm failing in week one. Like I can't like what? So from there it just like it was just a lot of yeah, and then sleep training, and do you sleep train, and all that stuff that is all over social media. But again, when you don't have the support system to like meet with you face to face on these things, it's like really hard to grasp all of that. And so yeah, second time around, completely different. I think my husband was back to work, uh gosh, maybe within 2 weeks the first time around. And I also like really educated myself on like you know our different leaves and parental leaves and how that all works. And so I ended up taking off the month, the 4 weeks prior to having him. And so I had all that time to soak up with my first, and all that time to prep, and all the ins and outs of that. But it really gave me time to just like process that any moment I'm gonna have a baby, and we're set. And so yeah, postpartum having, again, instead of 4 weeks off, 6 weeks off, it was um 5 months off. And with my husband, he had 2 whole months off. And so together doing that, uh, I mean, he was monumental in that because it was just like, I wasn't trying to figure out everything by myself, and let alone also a toddler who is still very needing me at 2 years old. And so, you know, Um, he took care of all of the food, like every single meal, um, and made sure like I had water like all the time near me. And so and the breaks of just like go take a shower and like all those things were so different this time around because it was like yeah, we both felt so supported. His mom came in, was just like cleaning everything, made sure like everything was just like spotless all the time. So again, like just having people coming in and like sitting down at my bedside, like, hey, how you doing? How's everything going? And taking the baby, holding him while I go and, comb out my hair or whatever it is. Um, it was just such a different experience, and having him home for those 2 months was, like, so special just as a family of 4 and, like, really soaking in that time all together. Um, yeah, it's just nothing like it. Like, I wouldn't do it any other way next time.
Totally. How, now that you've gone through postpartum and had that experience, how has that informed how you support your friends and family when they're going through postpartum?
Yeah, I I make it a point to not, like, ask them what they need. It's just kind of like I'm just gonna bring by a gift bag, a gift box of whatever, and it's like, you know, fuzzy socks for mom and a toy for the toddler or whatever, and just whatever is needed, and just doing it. Like I think just doing it rather than asking is for me, that's how I love being supported. Because if you were to ask me, I'm like, "Oh, no, I'm good." Like, I don't or I in that moment, I don't know what I need. Your presence would be nice, so I really try and just at least ask, like, when would be a good time to just, like, pop in and check in on you? Or, "Hey, I'm just gonna drop by this really quick, just to your porch," you don't have to answer the door, whatever. So, showing up, you never forget who just shows up by either just dropping something off at your porch or literally sitting with you and holding your baby while you comb out knots in your hair. Like, you you don't forget those type of things. Or a simple DoorDash.
Yep, for sure. Um, so talking to the mom who's listening who has had a rough first birth. It didn't go any way that she wanted it to. She had stuff going wrong or stuff just not going how she pictured it, how she wanted it. And she's pregnant now. What would you say to her?
I think a good takeaway from my birth stories and what advice I would share with another mom is go into it extremely flexible, um, in mind and heart, because your heart can desire whatever your birth story wants to look like. But as told in my story, like there are going to be instances where your baby is or might be, they might have another need that needs to be met in that moment. And so that has to be priority. And so having that, going into it with the mindset and the heart that is flexible to changes and intensity and, intense things that might happen, like those being flexible in those moments is what is going to help you make decisions because you're not going to go into it with so much anxiety or, not knowing. Like yeah, I would say being extremely flexible um and educating yourself on all the different options, all the different, scenarios of what could happen because then then you just know. You have like the awareness of what what could be. And then, yeah, whenever something happens, it's like, okay, I'm, I know what this is. And then you face it however you need to face it. But yeah.
Amazing. I love it. That was beautiful.
Okay.
Um, So, yeah, I think that's it for today. I have had such a great time talking about your
Yeah.
birth stories again. I loved this so much. Thank you so much for being on. All of the classes that Lauren was talking about, I have actually used and created a full childbirth education course that goes actually more in depth, and that you can actually find in the show notes, as well as since then, kind of inspired by Lauren's story, actually, I have a free ebook called The 5 Steps to a Fear-Free Birth, so you can also find that in the show notes. But yeah, that's it for today. Lauren, thank you so much for talking with me and sharing your stories. I will see you later, Lauren, and
Thank you.
for everyone else, thank you so much for joining me on Let's Talk Birth.